let it run. Okay. Okay. So we have a very basic app with us. Now we gonna implement the room database in our new project. Okay. So let's first clean up the things that are not required. Okay. Those previews are not required. Okay. We don't need this. Okay. So let's remove this. Okay. Just a second. Cool. So let me know if my Android Studio emulator is visible. Cool. Okay. So we gonna implement the room database. Okay. Here is the link. Okay. Gonna share with you all over here. Okay. So you can always have a look. Okay. So now what we wanted to do, we wanted to implement SQL database, or basically a relational database using SQL in our Android project. Okay. So uh, Android team have created a library called Room, okay, which is an abstraction over an SQLite database, which was uh, previously been used to store data uh, in Android using databases. Okay, so they have created a new library Room, okay, which help us to write and perform the SQL operation more easily. Okay, and comes with another more features. Okay, so for example, your SQL queries that you write now are compile time verified, that if everything looks good to the compiler or not. Okay, we have some annotations to minimize the repetitive work. Okay, and there is a concept of flows, routine support as well. Okay, which we don't gonna discuss today, but in future all we gonna discuss it in a little more detail. Okay, but there is also a support for streamlined uh, basically flows and coroutines. Okay, and some migration supports as well. Okay, so in order to do so, what we need to do, we need to implement these two library, these two things. Okay, first is the library itself. So I'll go to the app level gradle. Okay, I'm gonna disclose this for time being. Okay, here we have implemented the room version. Okay, the room runtime library. Other thing that we need is the Kotlin annotation processing. Yeah. Okay, so why we need this, I'm just gonna share you in like next 10 to 20 minutes when we gonna use that. Okay, and we also need this Kotlin extension and coroutine support. Okay, so just so that we can make our uh, uh, methods suspendable. Okay, now in order to use the Kotlin annotation, we need to do id Kotlin get. Okay, something like this. Okay. I hope this will resolve the issue. Let's see. Okay. So it's been working. Okay. Now we also need hilt in order to create our whole application. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, have already created a project. Okay. But somehow I'm facing some material 3 issues, but don't worry, we're gonna have a look into that later. But let's take the dependencies that we need for our project. Okay. So this is the hilt dependency we need in order to implement dependency injection using dagger hilt. Okay. So I have already explained you about this in our previous class. Okay. So you can refer that as well. Okay. So hilt comes with their own dependency, uh, annotation annotation processing compilers plug dependencies, and this is for using the hilt view model thing. Okay. Now as we have introduced this, we have also need to introduce the id as well, the plugin id as well. Okay. So we can let know that we are using hilt to our app module. Okay. And in the project level we need to add this id as well, that we are using hilt but of this version. Okay. So going to here, here, and here. Okay. So if everything done correctly, if I do sync now, everything should be working fine. Okay. Let me also grab this chunk of code which will enable the Kotlin annotation processing types. Okay. This this this. Okay. The the this part of doing Android development, like adding lots of dependency and checking, it's little tedious, little painful, but uh, this is we this is the mandatory step that we have to do anyway. Okay. If I run the project, everything should working fine. Generally whenever you do a gradle string change, try to run things and see if everything working fine or not. Okay. So currently we are not showing anything because I have removed that text message from here. Okay. But as per our understanding, things are working fine. Okay. Now in order to make it work, we need to add few things. Okay. uh, so let let us grab those things. Okay. We need a data package. Okay. Which from where we gonna uh, fetch the data. Okay. We gonna fetch the data from local. Okay. Which is our database. Okay. Then we need a package for di. Okay. Where we are gonna do all the injection stuff using the module. Okay. and and we need some package for having common components, the UI components. Okay. So starting from the data layer. Okay. We're gonna create the repository, uh, file repository. Okay. It will be an interface. Okay. Just to save some time, I'll just copy the things that I have already implemented. Okay. uh, hmm, like this. Okay. Those are the methods that we're gonna need from our repository. Okay. Now it is asking that we need a node entity. Okay. Now coming to this, let me create a package called model, uh, a package called repo as well. Okay. And move it to here. Okay. Now, in the model, we need to create a model or a data class which gonna help us do the certain commands or certain data sharing, data holding, so that we can use it in our UI level as well and use it in the database level as well. Okay, so I'm gonna create a data class called note entity. Okay, and I'm gonna give some parameters to it. Okay, the ID will be int. It the note will gonna contain authors. Okay, author basically. Okay, we gonna contain the content of the note. Okay, and we gonna contain date. Okay, date as date. Take second. Be careful using what date format you are being using. Okay, uh, it was from the Java util package only. Okay, now till now you might have understood that we are creating a note taking application. Okay, where uh, we gonna save the notes that is being entered by the user. Okay, and we gonna populate the note whatever is been already present in the database. Okay, now coming to the documentation, we have already set up the dependencies. Okay, now there are primary components in room database that we need to understand. Okay, so uh, you have a room database. Okay, where all the tables are being present. Okay, you have a data access object. Okay, through which you gonna communicate to the room database. Okay, and entities are the tables from where you gonna fetch the details. Okay, so room database is the top level hierarchy which consists of entities, some tables. Okay, and you access this room database using a DAO object. What is a DAO? DAO is a data access object which help us to uh, uh, make some queries over the room database to make a communication with the room database. It can be either taking the data from room or putting the data to the room. Okay, and here is our application. Okay, so till now when we created this note entity, it is an entity. Okay, uh, a table that we gonna have in our database. Okay, so let's have a look. Hmm. So if you are creating an entity, okay, you have to annotate it with an entity annotation which generally tells the compiler that this user data class is somewhat related to the room database. Okay, so if I go here, okay, and give it entity, okay, you can see this entity annotation is coming from the Android X room library. Okay, now if I wanted, I can give it a table name here. Okay, it can be note. Okay, and because on yesterday's session we got to learn that a table generally needs an ID, which is an unique identifier, which act as a primary key. Okay, uh, throughout, like, for the table. Okay, for example, this node entity, if we have to differentiate between two nodes, we're gonna use the ID and check if the ID is different or equal. Okay, this ID will be unique throughout the entries of these nodes, and it will be annotated as a primary key so that the database and we can always differentiate between different items of a same table. Okay, so uh, in our MySQL workbench we used to annotate a primary key something like this. Okay, and we used to do auto increment like this. Okay, so uh, but in order to do this same thing we have a different way of writing, which is something like primary key. Okay, and you're gonna say auto generate to true. Okay, and you're gonna give a default value of this id to be 0. Okay, so whenever you populate the data of these three things, and if you don't provide this, the database will be or the system will be giving this an id uh, on the behalf of you. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that if we repeat any id or if we miss any number or something. Okay, we can rely on the system to maintain that. Okay. Hmm. So till now let me know if I'm making sense. Are you all able to understand what I am sharing? Cool. For others who didn't responded, let me uh, draw and let it show you for more clarity. Just a second. Hmm. Okay, so yesterday we learned that a database consists of tables. Okay, it can be more than one table. Okay, something like this, something like this. Okay, a table used to corresponding have few properties. Okay, something like name. Let's say this is a customer table, this is a transaction table. So a customer will have a name. Okay, have a contact detail with an id. Okay, and the transaction will also gonna have a id, amount of transaction and date, let's assume. Okay, so the same way as we have created tables previously in our MySQL DBMS system, in Android, if we wanted to create this table, what we're gonna do? We're gonna create a data class. Okay, we're gonna annotate it with the entity annotation. We're gonna give it a column, sorry, table name that is gonna be identified as note call table. Okay, and those this table will contain those properties. Okay, जैसे हमने कल we got to learn about id which act as a primary key. Okay, and we learned that it is an auto increment feature available in MySQL workbench. Okay, similarly same thing is been available in our Android uh, room library using this at the rate primary key annotation. And when I give it auto generate to true, it the system gonna give the id for each item of this table. Okay, and we have given it a default value 0 so that we don't have to provide any value for the id in upcoming parts. Okay, now I hope this entity thing is been cleared. Okay, now let's move with the repository part as well. Okay, uh, let's create the sort type here only. Enum class sort type. So we're gonna learn also how to sort the queries based on few inputs. Okay, so it's gonna be author, it's gonna be content, it's gonna be date. Okay, So if I go here, I can always import it. Now let's try to implement this repository. Okay, cool. So let me implement those methods. Now this repository will act as a bridge between the network call and the local data. So it this class has a dependency on local service. Okay, so we gonna create a local service here. So class, it will be of interface local service. Okay, now this local service will have those method which we are needed for our repository. Okay, because this have just use data that is been in the local database only. Okay, so just to save some time, I'm gonna just copy this stuff. Okay, and put it here, something like this. Okay, so again this is gonna do the operation on the entity only. Okay, so let's implement this local service. Let us call it as roomdb, uh, roomdb basically. Okay, which gonna implement the local service. Okay, and we're gonna implement it something like this. Okay, now roomdb is dependent upon what? Can anybody guess? अगर मेरे को नोट डालना है या नोट अपडेट करना है या फेच करना है, तो मैं ये रूम डीबी क्लास विल शुड बी डिपेंडेंट अपॉन ऑन विच डिपेंडेंसी?
The room database.
Correct, correct. So this room db class is gonna be depend upon the database. Okay, so let's create our database as well. Let's see how we can create database as well. Okay, let me do something like this. Okay, so here we have created an entity. Okay, we will come to the DAO in a second. Okay, let's first understand that how we can create a room database. Okay, uh, what the documentation of this room library says, that if you wanted to create a room database, generally you have to extend that, uh, uh, extend your database with room database class. Okay, which will be an abstract. Okay, and provide a abstract uh, uh, function for the DAO, which gonna return the DAO that you have created, along with the database annotations, which gonna contains how many tables you have created, basically the entities, and what version of the database you have been using right now. Okay, so in order to create our database, we need a DAO uh, interface, which is nothing but a communication channel between the database and your app. Okay, so what room says कि आप हमें बस बता दो कि आपको क्या क्या चाहिए है, इसका जो भी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होगा इस यूजर डाओ का इस डेटाबेस से रिलेटेड, वो ऑटोमेटिक लाइब्रेरी कर लेगी. ओके, so we just have to create an interface of things that we want, and the framework or the library will gonna implement this and give you the required things that you needed. Okay, so let's copy this thing. Okay, the DAO interface. Okay, let's here local package db. Okay, let's create a file or interface called note DAO. Okay, so we need to annotate it with the DAO so that the compiler knows that this is this interface is related to database. Okay, and we're gonna have few methods that we require throughout our application. Okay, so uh, let me write it myself only. Okay, so the first method that you require is to insert the data. So we're gonna use the insert annotation. Okay, fun, or you can also make it suspend fun insert note of type note entity. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Okay, Nito, if you remember how we have done the insertion in MySQL, we have to do something like, let me write it for you, insert into node table, right, where the values will be this. Okay, yeah, if you remember, we used to do something like this. Now id will be provided by itself. The author, we have to provide author, Niket, and the content is something here or anything that I want. Okay, and the date value. Okay, so we used to use the now function of the SQL, right? So if you remember, in order to insert a value into a table, we have to write this much of code, right? Now, what room says, you don't have to do that much. Just annotate it with the insert annotation. Okay, provide what kind of data you are inserting through a parameter, and we're gonna do the insertion for you in the database. Okay, similarly, as we have for insert, we have for suspend fun update node. We're gonna take node this, and we're gonna update the node. Okay, uh, we also have similar things for delete. Okay, so we have for delete, suspend fun delete a node. It's gonna take the node entity and gonna delete it. Okay, uh, we also have this upsert annotation, which is mixture of update and insert. So if you use this upsert annotation, it gonna insert into the database if that node entity doesn't exist. Okay, but if it exists, it gonna update it. Okay, so if you want, you can generally put those two method into one using this annotation. Okay, नाउ ये तो CRUD ऑपरेशन हो गया कि ये क्रिएट हो गया, ये अपडेट हो गया, डिलीट हो गया. लेट्स ऑल्सो क्रिएट फॉर अ रीड. Okay, where we want to fetch all the nodes that is present in the database. So suspend fun fetch all nodes. Okay, which gonna give us a list of node entity. Okay, so if we wanted to fetch everything, we need to write a query. Okay, and we can do that using this at the rate query annotation. Okay, we're gonna say select everything from node table. Okay, so it's gonna select everything from the node table and give us the node entity. Okay, so till now let me know लोगों को DAO पता चला, what is DAO, what we are doing through DAO. Hello, am I audible? My question is, are you all understood what we are doing with the DAO interface here? Cool. I don't get much confidence from you all people when you remain this much silent. Assuming that none of you have understood, let me create draw it and let you know, okay, what we are doing. So in room database, what it says, that there is a database, okay, you call it whatever you want. Let's say we called it NoteDB, okay, okay, which gonna have tables in the form of tables only. But we, in Android or in this implementation, we generally denote it as entity, okay. Each entity represent a table in this room framework, okay. Now what Android team says, that if you wanted to access this database, you need to access the database using a DAO interface, okay. Now we know that if interface is being created, it's for a reason, so that any other one can implement it, okay. सो जब हम इंटरफेस बना रहे हैं डाओ का, उसमें मेथड्स दे रहे हैं कि मेरे को इंसर्ट चाहिए, डिलीट चाहिए, अपडेट चाहिए, रीड चाहिए, with some annotations, okay. Now what the framework will do at the compile time, that it gonna take this interface, okay, into the framework and give the implementation of that inside it by itself, okay. सो हमें बस डाओ का इंटरफेस इस्तेमाल करना है, उसको बता देना है कि हमें क्या क्या चाहिए, जो उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन है वो फ्रेमवर्क संभालेगा, ओके. सो वी कम्युनिकेट थ्रू डाओ इन ऑर्डर टू कम्युनिकेट टू द डेटाबेस डायरेक्टली, ओके. अब समझ में आया व्हाट वी आर डूइंग विथ डाओ. कूल, ओके. सो we have told DAO कि मेरे को I want to insert the node, update the node and delete the node. So what room have told us कि instead of writing this query again and again, just use this insert, update and delete, okay. We are smart enough to understand कि if you have provided a note entity table, you wanted to delete an item from the note table or update from the note table or insert to the note table. But if you are fetching something, do explicitly know from which table you wanted to fetch the data. So when we do note, so it is taking me to this note entity, okay. I hope this is been clear till now, okay. Now uh, room db will gonna use the DAO object, okay, inject constructor, okay, private val note DAO, okay, which is an interface. So if I wanted to insert something, it's gonna be note DAO dot insert note entity. This insert note from the DAO is coming from this interface, which the implementation. सो इंटरनली क्या होगा, ये नोट डाओ को आ, ये फ्रेमवर्क खुद एक क्लास बना के इम्प्लीमेंट करेगा, और उसके जो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होगा वो खुद देगा. सो वी डोंट हैव टू डू दैट, वी जस्ट हैव टू talk to the interface, okay, and the implementation will be done by the room framework, okay. So we just need to do this, tell the DAO that I wanted to update things. Okay, note and this. If I wanted to fetch, it will be note DAO dot fetch notes. Okay, and for sort we need to create a method for sorting. Okay, so let's go to the DAO. Let's create some method for sorting. Okay, so this will be something like this. Let's copy this query, query, query. Okay, select everything from the node. Okay, where it is been ordered by author. Okay, so fetch all nodes by author. It gonna gives us the list of node entity only. Okay, similarly we're gonna do for other filter types. So instead of author I wanted to do, let's say, content. Okay, and the method name will change by content. Okay, similarly we're gonna do it for date. Okay, and it's gonna be by date. Okay, okay. So what we have done here, we are telling the database through DAO key, please give me all the nodes that is available in the database, order by author. Let's say we wanted to do author in the descending order, content in the descending order, date in the ascending order. Okay, so please query it all, order it by content in descending order, and give me a list of content, list of node entity. Okay, so if I wanted to sort things basis on some types, I'm gonna say return. Okay, when sort type. Okay, because it's an enum, so the compiler will give us the remaining branches. अगर author से आया कि author से करो sorting, so we gonna say DAO please sort it by author. Okay, if it said ki content, we gonna say note DAO please sort it by content. Okay, and similarly for date, note DAO sorted by date. Okay, as simple as that. अब आप देख सकते हो in a single method I have handle all the three scenarios of sorting, so that we don't want to do it again and again. Okay, now this roomdb uses DAO, which is our local service. Okay, now we gonna implement this it here. Okay, so our repository is uh, dependent upon the local service. Okay, private val local service. Okay, now this local service can be more than just one thing. Okay, it can be database, it can be some raw files inside your project, it can be shared preferences, it can be data stores. Okay, there are lots of stuff. That's why we divide them basis on local and remote. Okay, so if we do this, local service dot insert node, take the node entity. Okay, local service dot update node, take the node entity. Fetch nodes, so we're gonna do return local service dot fetch nodes. Okay, sort node, sort node will be again simple, local service dot sort nodes wind on the sort type the person have provided. Okay, let's say the base, the default value of that will be date. Okay, that always sorted on the basis of date. Acha, we have to do it in here. Okay, so that it gonna reflect it here. Okay. What's the issue? Acha, it gonna take the sort date anyway. Okay, because we have provided in the repository. Now uh, अब हमने ये सारी चीज बना ली है, but we need to provide in the module as well. Okay, so what we gonna do, uh, we gonna take the di package. Okay, let me just take this those two things, because I've already told you how we can do that. mm, okay, it's gonna give us some errors. This is our room db. Okay, something like this. mm, I'm not sure if it gonna take it. Yes. hmm. Something like this. That's why copy pasting things also need some caution, else you gonna break something. Okay, so this gonna be simple this. Okay, so I hope you are already aware about this dagger implementation. What we are doing, we are creating a module, install it the singleton component. Because it's an interface that we wanted to inject, we need to use binds. अगर मैं इस चीज को हटा दूंगा तो ये काम नहीं करेगा. Okay, I need to the bind the implementation with the interface, so that the compiler know कि whenever I am injecting an interface, the dependency framework have to use the repository implementation. Okay. Similarly, because we wanted to inject local service, I wanted to specify the local service implementation, which is nothing but our room database implementation. Okay, which is using the DAO. Okay, now you can see कि DAO के बाजू में we are not getting that hammer sign. Okay, the arrow sign, that how to create the नोट डाउ ऑब्जेक्ट. ओके, अभी डैगर हिल्ट को पता नहीं है कि इसका ऑब्जेक्ट कैसे बनाना है. वाई द डैगर हिल्ट डजंट नो इट, बिकॉज हमने अभी तक उसको दिया नहीं है. ओके, सो वी गोना क्रिएट another file called as database module. Okay, we gonna create it something like this. Okay, in order to do so, we need to first create a database. So we gonna create a database something like note database. Okay, and how we can create a database, we have already seen our in our documentation that if we wanted to create a database, we need to do something like this. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna copy it here. Okay, I'm gonna name it as note database. Okay, something like this. That gonna be duplication, and our user DAO will be nothing but note DAO, which gonna implement the note DAO interface. We're gonna just uh, uh, import all the necessary annotations and library. Okay, so what we have done, we have created a note database class. Okay, uh, this is the class which is corresponding to the database that it's going to create via the room library. So we have extended the room database class. Okay, now as you have already know, in room a database communicate through uh, a DAO interface, right? So we have created an abstract functionality of this DAO. Okay, so whenever we provide this, the node DAO will get implemented, and the framework will give the implementation to it, to that interface. Okay, now to explicitly know the compiler that this node database class is a database class, we have annotated it with the database annotation and gives all the table that this database is going to have. Okay, this a node entity is a table that I have already shown you. So I have given the node entity as the array list of entities that this table is gonna hold. Okay, and I've given this a version 1, which tells us that this note database is a recent version for this application. In future, let's say you wanted to add one more parameter, something like, let's say, rating. Okay, so if you wanted to do so, then you have to write the database migration logic and update this database version to 2. Okay, so that's something out of scope for our small tutorial, but this is generally how you create a database in Android for room library. Okay, so let me know if you understand till here. Cool. So if you are not able to understand it somehow, don't worry. You all have to do is read this documentation. Okay, this is generally a process of creating a database. Okay, so let's say if you wanted to have pizza today, what you gonna do, you have to go to Zomato. You, if your mobile doesn't have the Zomato app, you gonna download it from the Play Store, log in it, search for a good restaurant, order it, wait for 30 minutes, then have your pizza, right? So if everything has a procedure, this is the same how we can define a database in Android. First we add the dependency. Okay, then we create our table that we wanted to hold. Okay, then we create a DAO. Okay, a DAO is nothing but a communication channel between your code and the database. You don't want to access the database uh, directly. You wanted to do through a communicator in between. Okay, that in between communicator is nothing but a DAO. Okay, then if the DAO is completed, you gonna create a database. Okay, saying that please create a database in the name of this, which gonna use this database. Okay, in future if you wanted to create more database, you have to implement more abstract methods or of these databases. Okay, now we have defined that a database is going to use this DAO. Okay, now we have to create a object of it. Okay, so let's see how we can create a object of it. Okay, so I'm gonna take this. Okay, and in our database module, okay, it gonna be module which gonna be installed in singleton component. Okay, okay, which is of gonna be end of type object. Okay, now I'm gonna say provides a singleton of database. Fun provide database. Okay, which gonna be something like this. Okay, so we're gonna use the database builder. Okay, because this database builder needs an application context. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna inject it using this handy method provided by Dagger Hill. That is this application context annotation. Okay, we're gonna name it as application context. Okay, and it will be of type context. Okay, now the room also needs the name of the database class that you have provided, which is nothing but note database. Okay, and here I'm gonna give name to my note database, something like note db. Okay, and if I don't do build, then you're gonna be scratching your head why things are not building. Okay, अगर मैं इसको ऐसे दे दूंगा, तो this provide database, if you see the return type, it is of room database dot builder. Okay, अभी हम room database बना रहे हैं, उसको बताते हुए कि एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट आपको यूज करना है. एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज नथिंग बट जो आपका एप्लीकेशन है, उ, उसका पूरा कॉन्टेक्स्ट लेते हुए ये एक डेटाबेस बनाएगा. ओके, and we have given it the name of the class which is the database that we have defined. Okay, and we have like attached the DAO with it. Okay, so the builder will be responsible for creating the database on the behalf of us. Okay, then in the last we need to call the this build method. Okay, again now if I show you the return type of it, you can see that we are currently returning a note database, which is nothing but this class. Okay, now if I have provided the database, I have to provide the I have to uh, provide the DAO as well. Okay, okay, why we need to provide the DAO? Because in the local service you can see, again we are not seeing any arrow icon over here, because this class doesn't know how to create an object or how to access the object of type note DAO. Okay, so in a module we're gonna tell the hilt framework that if you whenever required a note DAO, you can create it something like this. Okay, so I'm gonna take node database here. Okay, and I'm gonna say node database dot node DAO. Okay, now you can see this method generally know how to create a node database object, which is this, and now it also knows how to create a DAO object. Okay, if you can see, now यहाँ पे we are seeing that hammer kind of a icon with an arrow icon. If I tap on it, I can see that it's been provided over here. Okay, because note DAO, you can see being a interface, we don't have to do the bind, because we have already defined in our note database as a note DAO object. Okay, so if I wanted to access it, I gonna access it through my note database object. Okay, now let me know किस किस को समझ में नहीं आया. सबको समझ में आ गया? Who wanna be the first to explain what we have done till now? Come on, go ahead. Anyone wants to volunteer and explain what we have done till now? Okay. Yeah, Shiva, go ahead. Hello, Shiva. Hello, Shiva. No issues. Darshini, you wanted to explain the whole process?
DAO is like an interface which will connect the SQL query with the app. So we can able to create, update, delete operations and all through DAO. Mm, yes, sir.
Correct, correct, Rashni. That's pretty much what I wanted as an answer. So DAO is an interface which connect the database in your code. Whatever query it you provide, whenever you call it, the DAO do the operation on over the database and give you the result. Okay. My question also include: did you
And
understand?
yes. And
Yeah,
since DAO is an interface, we are like creating an abstract function and then we are providing it.
correct, correct. Yes, absolutely. And did you also understood what we are doing over here with these two lines?
Yes, sir. Creating the database and here providing that interface module.
Correct. So here we are creating a room database object. Okay. And here using this room database object, we are providing the DAO, which is essential for our local service implementation. Okay. So I hope this is clear for everyone uh, till here. Okay. So with this thing, whatever we needed as per the site of a data layer in our app, we have implemented it. Okay. Now it's just matter of implementing the UI. Okay. And we are good to go. Okay. So in the main activity, I'm gonna create a file name as main view model. Okay. Which gonna implement the view model. Okay. Not view, but a view model, because it's a view model and we wanted to use it uh, across our application, which gonna also handle the dependency injection. So we're gonna annotate it with tilde view model. Now I wanted to inject our repository. Okay. So repository of type repository, not repository implementation. हमें implementation को नहीं करना है, हमें repository interface को inject करना है. Okay. When we inject a repository and we see of what implementation we have provided, you can see we have provided repository implementation as the object for this repository interface. Okay. If I showcase you, this repository implementation is implementing this repository, and this repository implementation have a dependency of local service. So thus we are able to use all those methods easily. Okay. हमने ऐसा क्यों किया? Let's say in future, instead of this, we wanted to provide a fake implementation. हमें मान लो database में एक्चुअल कॉल ना करते हुए कहीं फेक डेटा रिटर्न करना है, just to test other scenarios, we can do class fake database. Okay. which gonna do the implementation of repository only. Okay, and if you call those insert method, here you can provide your own implementation. For example, if you wanted to return list of nodes, you can do list of node entity, and then you can provide your own uh, data that you wanted to test. Okay, that's why we are using an interface instead of injecting a direct class. Okay, now that being said, we gonna create a variable which gonna hold all the list. So var node list of type mutable state of uh, node entity. Okay, list of node entity. Okay, which will be an empty list for time being. Okay, in the init block we're gonna do view model scope dot launch. Okay, using the repository to fetch the nodes. Okay, now we're gonna create a method called fun insert node. We're gonna get the node from the outside. Okay, then we're gonna do view model scope dot launch that do repository dot insert the node using the node entity. Okay, uh now fun uh fetch all nodes. Okay, node fetch all nodes will not take anything, but rather do this fetch node. Okay, so instead of writing it like this way, I'm gonna do fetch all nodes method something like this for readability. Okay, now what we have done so far, I've used the view model scope dot launch. You don't have to go very deep about it, but understand in a way that it's a scope uh, that kills the operation if activity gets killed. Okay, so we don't want it to fetch the nodes if the activity that this view model is associated with is got killed. Okay, matlab uh, if there is no way the screen is visible, you don't want it to fetch the things anyway in the background to never showcase it in any place, right? So to automatically kill the process, we generally use a scope, and we generally create a coroutine, and inside that we call the suspend function. But we're gonna discuss it in more detail in the last week of our Android course. Okay, so don't worry about that. Just try to understand this. This is a normal way of calling a method from an uh, from our view model. Okay, so we have created this. Okay, now let's work on our UI. Okay, so I'm gonna create the UI over here only. Okay, I'm gonna say column. Okay, I'm gonna give a modifier of type modifier that gonna take fill max size. Okay, uh, vertical arrangement of type top only. This is by default. Okay, uh, that's pretty much it. We're gonna add the padding here. So padding from the scaffold. Okay, now I'm gonna create a row. Okay, which will be gonna take modifier dot fill max width. Okay, जितनी maximum width available है we gonna take that. Okay, we gonna provide vertical sorry horizontal arrangement. to be of space evenly. Okay, then I'm gonna create three buttons. Okay, sort on the basis of author. Okay, here we gonna do the sorting mechanism call. Okay, and I'm gonna paste it over three times. So sort on the basis of author, content, or the date. Okay, something like this. Okay, now this is for the buttons. uh, we gonna also create a button. Acha, let's do it in the floating action button part. Okay, floating action button position will be web position end. Okay, floating action bar button will be like this, an icon button. Okay, which gonna have an icon of type icons dot default dot add. Okay, the content description will be node add. Okay, uh if you wanted to do more UI thing, you can always do that. So in the on button click, we gonna save the node. So what we gonna do, we first need a view model object. So main, let's call it view model only, view model of time main view model. Okay, and we gonna initialize it using this. Okay, we're gonna say view model dot insert node, but we now need a node entity. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a dialog. Okay, which gonna implement the uh, insert functionality for us. Okay, so we're gonna create a variable called show insert dialog flag. Okay, of type by remember, because we wanted to skip the recomposition part for this uh, variable. Okay, mutable state of false. Okay, we gonna import this as well. Okay, now whenever we press the icon button, we gonna show the insert dialog, something like this. Okay, here we gonna say if show insert dialog, then show a dialog, show a dialog. Okay, now in order to get the data, what we're gonna do, we gonna say lazy column. Okay, which gonna use the items method, which takes a list. Okay, we know we're gonna say view model dot note list dot value. Okay, and here we get the note entity. So to represent a note entity, we need a note card method as well. Okay, so I have created something handy over here. So let me grab those things, not in the UI, not in the DI, feature, component, note card. Okay, for some reason I'm not sure why it is happening, but my compiler is giving me issues, or else I should have shown you how the app was working. I'm not sure why this is happening. I have to look into that. But for saving some time, let me copy this part. Okay, I'm little scared if I do that, it's gonna reflect in our app as well. Okay, so let me do one thing. Let me create everything here only. Okay, So we need now a card in order to showcase a note entity. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say row. Okay, uh, basically it will be a column. Okay, which gonna show the author name first, the content, followed by the date, and the a delete icon. Okay, so column will be text, which gonna be it dot author. Okay, followed by a divider. Okay, followed by a text of content that we wanted to show, followed by a divider. Okay, then here we're gonna have a row which will be of type horizontal arrangement, space between. Okay, which gonna have a text which gonna say it dot date. Okay, uh, date of type 2 string. Okay, and in the last we're gonna have a icon button. Okay, which gonna be of type icons dot default dot delete, and a content description of type delete no. If you're wondering what this content description do, it comes handy if you are doing the UI testing of this composable. Okay, in the view model, now we're gonna do main view model dot delete node and taking the it type. Okay, so now this is one method that we needed. Okay, this is how we gonna showcase the notes. Okay, now for simplicity purpose, just to showcase you how things are working, what I'm gonna do for time being, uh, commenting out this code commenting out this code, I'm gonna add a note by myself. Okay, so main view model dot insert note, I'm gonna create a note entity over here only. Okay, the author will be, let's say, Niket Jain. Okay, the content will be, uh, this is my story, blah blah blah. Okay, okay, and the date will be of type calendar from the Android util dot get instance dot time to get the date format. Okay, uh, let me take this handy method. Okay, let me explain it to you. So what we are doing here, because a date format is generally saved in a different arbitrary format like something like this, we wanted to convert this value into a string which is a readable form. Okay, so do so what we do, we create an extension function on date object. Okay, we says that we wanted to showcase date in this format using the locale. Locale is what's your different locale of your Android device. Okay, then we are returning a string. What we do, we do a simple date formatter which takes a format and a locale and format the date for us that we provide over here. Okay, so I can use it here to readable format. Okay, now we have added the node using the insert method. We have shown the node using fetching the nodes. Okay, and we have created a method to delete the node. Okay, so do so what we need to do, uh, just a second, my bad. We need to create a method fun delete node which gonna take node entity. Okay, view model scope dot launch repository dot delete method. Okay, so likewise we have a okay, likewise we have a update method. You can always add a delete method as well. The analogy remain the same, the implementation remain the same, but you provide the different, like instead of, like if me have to provide one more method and do it three places to make it changes here, but you have understood what I meant here, that if you wanted to delete, you just use the delete functionality. Okay, so for time being I'll just give it update node for avoiding confusion. uh, okay, so for time being we'll say update node. We gonna say it dot copy. Now the author became a new author. Okay, so this is how we can update. Let's see, yeah, let's use the create one. Okay, so let's try to run our app, first see that everything is working fine or not. But in order to do so we need to do some uh, di level stuff. We need to create a file called my application. Okay, which gonna extend the application class. Okay, it's gonna be held Android app. Okay, and in the manifest we wanted to name it as well. Okay, so application class annotation given, Android entry point given. Okay, all the modules been given which been distributed over the places where we need. Okay, so the room db is using the node DAO working fine. Okay, let's see if the local service has been getting provided or not. So in the local module we are providing the local service as well, this is working fine. Okay, now we're gonna see if our repository is been provided or not. Yes, the repository is also provided. Okay, like this way. And if our view model is been provided perfectly or not. So if I go to this, you can see the hilt view model is working and it's been annotated by the hilt view model. Okay, so let's hope this everything works and we can see an output. Let's let it be run. Meanwhile, if anyone have any questions, you can go ahead and ask it right away. Or Tulika, if you wanted to volunteer and explain what we have done till now, uh, apart from that creation of node database, in the second phase, what we have done till now, if you wanted to explain, you can go ahead. Okay, we got an error. Acha. So there is one thing that I wanted to share in the node entity, not this one. So this is the implementation thing done by the room database instead of you. Okay, so it do all the operations that you needed while using it. So if we go to node entity, okay, generally what we have done, we have given a custom data type for our table which is generally not supported by SQL directly. Matlab, SQL doesn't know how to save the date object. Okay, SQL can save string, can save long, can save integers, okay, but not a custom object type, which is date. Okay, so we need to explicitly tell uh, our our database that whenever this date type comes, convert it to the type that you understand. Okay, then insert it to the database. Then when I'm gonna fetch the data, convert that type back to the custom class that I have given you earlier. Okay, so what I meant by it, if we go to the documentation, uh, save define data using entities. Let me check if it is was here. mm, this is something that we have already covered about the primary key. This is something more about relation database that we are not covering now, but we have covered it earlier. Yeah, reference complex data. Okay, we wanted to have a look into this. Okay, so if you see the example, it is taking the example of date only. It is saying that room provides functionality for converting between primitive types to the custom types. Doesn't allow for object reference between entities. Okay, so generally in room database we can only store by default the primitive types, that the end, long, uh, uh, string values, something like that. But if you wanted to store something which is a object which is out of supported by the room database, we need to create a converters. Okay, so what this converter do, when you uh, when you inject when you try to insert a property of type date. Okay, so what it gonna do, it gonna take the date value and change it to the long. Okay, which is supported by the room db. Okay, but when you're fetching the data from the database, what it gonna do, it gonna take the long value, okay, and convert it to the type that you have defined, that you wanted, uh, like you have defined in your entity. Okay, so I'm gonna take this one. Okay, beside the entity I'm gonna provide it like this way. I'm gonna import this type converter. Okay, now following the documentation, let's see what ahead they are telling me to do. दे आर टेलिंग मी टू डू कि आपने जो अभी कन्वर्टर बनाया है ना, उसको आप अपने डेटाबेस से अटैच कर दो, so that whenever the transaction ever happens, कि you are using date anywhere in your entity, the conversion from one data type to another will be done automatically by the room database. Okay, so I'm gonna take this annotation, go to my database. Okay, and I'm gonna tell them explicitly कि whenever something complex comes, use this converter in order to convert the data from a date type to a long type. Okay, and a long type to a date type whenever I insert or fetch any data. Okay, so now I'm happy to go. Like now my database know how to convert this complex data into a data type that room supports, and when I'm fetching, I'm gonna get the data of how I wanted it to be shown. Okay, so if I do a clean project for the first, uh, now I'm gonna run the project again and see. Let's hope that we don't get any errors. Okay, so things been installed as we uh, liked it to be. Okay, now if I do plus on this, click on this. Okay, cool, something happened but the UI didn't show up. Okay, I will let you know why. But if you go to here in the app inspection, okay, if we go to node db, you can see we are able to see our table here, right? Let me refresh it. There is something wrong. We are not able to insert the data. Let's see why. Okay, so let's trace back everything from the main view model. Okay, so we have provided this. Let's see if we are calling it at the right place. Yes, I am giving the uh, author name, content, and this. Everything seems fine to me. Auto generated id true. Everything looks good to me till here. Insert note. Let's see the repository implementation. Insert note. Okay, insert note. Everything looks fine to me. Let me. Okay, we are fetching the notes but not showing in the note list. Okay, so whenever we're gonna fetch note, what we're gonna do, we're gonna say note list dot value equal to repository fetch node. So whatever the data we are getting, we are putting it inside the variable that we have created here. Okay, and every time I insert a node, i'm gonna say I'm gonna say fetch all nodes again. Okay, so whenever we insert a node, we're gonna fetch the database again. Okay, now this way it will inflate the UI, but I am spectacle why it is not doing the uh, or maybe I have not clicked it right. If the database had been populated, this should crash. Let me explicitly provide an ID. Okay, let me run this again. Maybe some dependency installation was pending, not sure. Let me delete this app and try again. Room database, uninstall this app. Okay, uninstall this app as well for avoiding confusion. Okay, Let's run this part again. Okay, nothing been shown as we expected. Now if I do plus, you can see an item is being shown over here, right? Niket Jain, this is my story, blah blah blah, with the time that we wanted, with the minutes, hours, and seconds, along with this a button to generally update or delete an item. Okay, so let's see if it is populating in the database or not. Okay, uh I'm very surprised that why it is not showing over here. Okay, let me try it again. Because I have explicitly provided an ID1, I think it should not work. Yeah, the app crashes because the ID1 already exists. Okay, so let me delete it. Uh, let me delete this part as well. Okay, let me run the app again. My emulator is right. My project room database detached. Hmm. Open a tab to run our query. Begin. Select everything from node. Cool. I'm not sure, there might be some bug or some uh, issue, but you can see if I do live updates, okay, refresh, if I add more, you can see now the DB is working fine, right? You can see that we are able to successfully add items to our DB, okay, based on the new IDs. The IDs been generating, auto generating, okay, and we are able to also inspect our database in order in future if you wanted to do debugging based on the data you already have, you can always do so from here. Okay, so there might be some issue that it might lag a little, or always check if you are selecting uh, application that is related to your package name. okay, always check if it is not showing detached keyword over here, okay. It can take some time, or you can always do this, that I make a simple query to check if the data has been over here or not. But the whole point of for this session was to showcase you how you can create a database, inject a database, use the DAO, what are entities, okay, and how you can use a database inspector. Okay, you can go and press double shift to open this dialog, write database inspector, okay, and if you click that, it gonna open that, okay. Or else you can go to this more tool window, and you gonna get this app inspector here, okay. And from here you can check for the database inspector and see what's the data it's been coming at your database or not, okay. So this is a very good inspector that been added, that will help you to debug your database and see if it is working as expected or not, okay. uh, if we do something like, let's say, add one more, okay. Now if you do select from note, okay, order by date in the descending order, okay. If I execute this, let's say, you can see the last item that we have added gone up, and the date is been arranged into the descending order, okay. So this is the same query that we have written in our DAO, and you can call them on the based of this button clicks, okay. Though this is was a very simple implementation of room database, in our future project we gonna implement the machine learning part, which gonna scan the text and then we gonna save it in our database, okay. So basically creating a full-fledged application where I'm gonna share the code as well, okay. But that will be containing more good UI, more good implementation, okay, with more complex implementation of other features like scanning and other stuff, okay. For time being, I have explicitly inserted a note from here, but in an actual application, whenever you do this plus button, a new screen should come up where you will fill the form, and then when hit the save button, you're gonna save the data. But keeping this tutorial very simple, I just wanted to show you how you can insert a data using this uh, view model insert node method, okay. And every time we are making a insertion, okay, we are fetching the list again, okay. But in a real prod application, we will not gonna do that, okay. Instead what we gonna do, we gonna do something like this. We gonna create a stream, okay, and it be of type flow of node entity, okay. So flow in the sense, what it gonna do, it gonna do something like this. So when using a flow, if you have a database, let's say, okay, which has lots of entries, okay, and whenever you add one more entry through your mobile phone, when you enter one more entry, okay, so this flow, what it does, whenever this data set changes, whenever this data set changes, it gonna call that method automatically, okay, and will provide all the latest updates that a database have, okay. So you don't have to explicitly do this fetch all nodes again and again, okay. जैसे हमने इंसर्ट किया तो fetch all nodes करना पड़ेगा, हम अगर अपडेट करेंगे तो हमें fetch all notes करना पड़ेगा, अगर हम delete करेंगे तो हमें fetch all notes करना पड़ेगा. But using this flow mechanism that we gonna learn in our future uh, sessions about flow, but when you do this, आपने एक बार उसको डिफाइन कर दिया, फिर आपको उसको बार बार देखने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. इट गोना अपडेट द स्टेट automatically or the variable automatically, and because our composable will be collecting that state and reflecting on the base of that, our composable gonna recompose automatically. Okay, but that's something for the future. I don't want to add that in this scenario because we already make it little big for this simple database thing. But I just wanted to showcase you how you can create a module to provide the database. Okay, and how you can fetch, insert, and update the database using the DAO. Okay, so these two things were the important part of this session, and how we can use it to create or implement database in our application. Okay, I hope you all have learned something new today uh, regarding Android, how to implement an database. Okay, at starting, things might look very complex, but trust me, within 1 or 2 session of practice from your own end, you're gonna implement things very easily. Okay, I'm gonna provide you the code base. You can always have a look and play around with it so that you can learn more things on the same. Okay, so I'm here for a couple of minutes. If anyone has any doubts, you can go and ask right now, or else we can drop off. Cool, I think we are good to go. I'm very skeptical why there are no doubts, but no worries. If you start practicing, you might face few issues, and that's the part of the process. So try to fix it. If not, then bring it to me. I will try to fix it for you. If you have any doubts, feel free to ping me over the channel or in the DMs. Okay. And yes, tomorrow Sunday will be an holiday for you all to implement those learning. On Monday, we're gonna create a new project, a text scanner project using machine learning kit, and we're gonna apply all the learnings that we have done so far. Okay, so see you on Monday, and have the rest of your weekend with you. Okay, happy weekend to you all. Okay, so bye bye, see you on Monday.